Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, hello everybody. Hello, welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler with you today. Pleasure to be back on. Today we're talking about understanding the core needs of masculine and feminine in partnership. You know, I wanted to speak about this topic because it's been something that I've been talking a lot about on social media recently and something that a lot of people have really been appreciating and getting a lot of value out of. And I think there's a lot I want to say about this, and I want to talk about kind of what the masculine is, what the feminine is. And this is distinct from gender. I think it's important to start out by saying that we all have masculine and feminine in us, and we all need both parts of ourselves to be nurtured, right? So we need the masculine part to have expression and to be nurtured. We need the feminine part to have expression and be nurtured. And that's whether you're a man or whether you're a woman, we all need that. That's something we all need. And yet at the same time, in relationships, if there's not a certain polarity, right? If there's not one partner who is operating in their masculine and one partner who's operating in their feminine, and this can even go for same-sex relationships. And today we're going to talk about it just for simplicity purposes. We're going to talk about it as though it's a man and a woman because that really just makes things simple. And this can be complex if we try to go into every little nuance of the conversation. But whether you're in a hetero partnership or you're in a same-sex partnership, you need a certain polarity, right? That's what creates attraction. That's what makes things sexy and juicy and exciting, right? Is when there's that polarity. It's like you could think about two polar magnets, right? Where you have a positively charged magnet and you have a negatively charged magnet, and those two forces are magnetized together, right? And this is nature. Right. And this is nature showing up in our bodies. It's showing up in our relationships. Right. So there's an energetic quality that is more masculine and an energetic quality that is more feminine. And when there is a polarization of one partner's in their masculine, one partner's in their feminine. Yeah, Casey, that's when things get juicy, right? That's when things get exciting. That's when there's passion and attraction and intimacy, and we want to get close to each other and we want to go deeper into our relationship with each other. And when both partners are in their masculine, there's not that magnetic attraction. There's not that polarity, right? There's not that, oh yeah, I want to get closer. I want to be magnetized toward you. Two masculine oriented or two people who are, oriented in their masculine, they might at best be friends. At worst, they might go to war, but they're not sexually attracted to each other. There's not a sexual polarity there. There's not a magnetism between us. And we could even say the same goes for the feminine, right? Two people who are oriented in their feminine, there's not much going on at all because the feminine is inactive, right? The feminine is the receiver, and we'll talk about that today. But so the masculine is very active. The feminine is inactive, right? The masculine is the provider. It's bringing the energy. The feminine is the receiver. It's receiving the energy. And so if you have two people who are providing, again, at at best they might be friends and they're both bringing a lot, and maybe there's an engaging conversation going on where there are opinions going back and forth, right? Or maybe they're, again, at worst, maybe they're competing with each other or they're going to war with each other. That would be the polarized, or excuse me, two people operating in their masculine. And two people operating in their feminine, they might be sitting back watching a movie together. They might be, both in a disengaged state. They might be enjoying each other's company, but they're not passionately engaged with each other. And it's actually a big thing in our world today, in like so many modern relationships. And I'll talk a little bit about why this is. But, just to give a common example, both people will work all day and they'll be busy providing all day for each other, for themselves, for their lives. And they'll be in their masculine all day long. And then at night, they both transition into their feminine and they sit in front of the TV and they, watch the TV, or, they're both disengaged. And what happens is, in a lot of partnerships, both people are in their masculine all day and in their feminine at the end of the day. And there's not, again, this polarization. And so in partnership, we need to nurture both parts of ourselves and nurture the polarized aspect of our partner, right? So if you're a more feminine oriented partner, you want to know how to nurture the masculine part of your partner. And if you're a more masculine partner, then you want to know how to nurture the feminine aspect of your partner. And you want to, in relationship and partnership, create an environment where you invite that polar opposite of where you operate from to come forth. And there are ways to do this in dating, right? If you're just getting to know somebody, there are ways to invite that masculine or that feminine energy in that person. And if you've been married to someone for a long time and you have a long-term committed partnership with them, right? There are ways to continue to foster and nurture that polarized energy so that attraction and that passion and that intimacy and that connection continues to be fueled in the relationship. And as I was just saying, kind of on default, and there are reasons for this in the world, right? There are like sociological reasons that our culture fosters this kind of depolarization where we both operate in our masculine or we both operate in our feminine. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, it can be a wonderful thing to be able to sit back and, both relax into your feminine and enjoy a movie together, right? That can be a wonderful thing to do. But if there's never any polarity in your relationship, or if in dating, if you show up on a date and both people are in their masculine, there's not going to be that attraction there where it's like, oh yeah, I want to get to know this person more. I want to invite them into my life. I want to experience more with them. There's no magnetism between the people. And so today I want to talk about how to create that magnetism and how to foster the needs that we need from each other in partnership. And so first, I just want to talk a little bit about, okay, what is the masculine? What is the feminine? Because we need to be able to recognize them. We need to be able to know which is which so we can know how to foster them. And so I said a little bit about this earlier, but the masculine is and everybody has probably heard this at one point or another, if you're on social media, if you follow any coaches who talk about this, but the masculine is the protector and the provider. Now, the masculine is usually very easy to identify because our world at large operates in the masculine. Our world at large values the masculine and devalues the feminine. And this is part of the problem, is culturally, both men and women often want to be in their masculine because the feminine has been devalued in society. Right? The feminine has been viewed as weak, as useless, as vulnerable, as needy. And so there's a strong, incentive for men to obviously operate in their masculine, but also for women to operate in their masculine. Because protecting and providing in our culture is seen as everything, right? To be in that masculine energy of protecting and providing is seen as everything. And the feminine is almost, it's more mysterious. It's more difficult to identify, and it's devalued in our culture because the feminine is inactive. So you can point really clearly to, oh, the masculine earns the money, the masculine cooks the meals, the masculine takes care of things that need to be taken care of, the masculine protects, the masculine provides, right? You can look very clearly to all of the doing, action oriented, providing oriented things and say, oh, well, there's the masculine, and it's very easy to identify. But then it becomes confusing when you're like, well, then what is the feminine? And a lot of us think that, like, oh, cooking and cleaning and nurturing is feminine. No, those are also masculine. We think they're feminine because traditionally those have been the things that women have done, right? Women cook, women clean. And I'm not saying that women should do that necessarily. I think women can do whatever they want to do. But if we look at kind of the traditional marriage, right, you had the masculine or the man who would, provide and go to work and earn the money and protect and provide for the household. And then the woman would cook and clean and take care of the children. And so when we think of male traditional roles versus female traditional roles, we tend to make the assumption that, okay, the things that men typically do, like earning money and taking care of the broken faucet and things like that, are masculine, and cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids is feminine. All of those activities are masculine because they are all oriented around protecting and providing. They are all giving. They are all taking care of. The feminine is the receiver. The feminine is the inactive energy. And this is what creates the magnetism, because you have the masculine, which is the providing energy. So the masculine wants to give, the masculine wants to provide, and the feminine wants to receive. If you have two people, again, you have the man, I'm looking at a traditional kind of marriage here. You have the man who goes to work every day and he fixes the broken faucet and he protects and provides for the household and he does all those male things. And you have the woman who's taking care of the kids and cooking the meals and cleaning the house and doing all of those female things traditionally. Both people are in their masculine energy all the time. Both people are participating in masculine activities all the time. And even if you flip-flop it, even if the woman goes to work and earns the money and takes care of the house and the man cooks and cleans and takes care of the kids, they're still both operating in their masculine energy all the time because they are always busy providing, taking care of things, making sure everybody is safe and taken care of and all the needs are met. Those are all masculine activities. The feminine has been devalued because it is inactive, right? So the feminine, if we take the example of cooking a meal, the feminine is sitting there receiving the meal that's being prepared while the masculine is cooking it. And yes, even if the man is sitting there while the woman is making him a meal, the man is in his feminine, sitting there waiting to be provided for, while the female or the woman provides for him by preparing that meal. Right? So if he goes to work all day and he's in his masculine at work earning the money, and then he comes home and he sits down at the dinner table and she makes him a meal, well, now he's just shifted into his feminine. He's just shifted into the receiving mode, and she's now in the masculine role providing for the need that needs to be met there. So the kind of problem that we have in our relationships and in our culture is that nobody wants to be in the feminine role because it's been perceived as weak. It's been perceived as needy. It's been perceived as lazy. It's been perceived as all these kinds of undesirable things. But the feminine is so powerful And this is when we think of it as weak or lazy or needy, we are not recognizing the power that the feminine has, because the power of the feminine is that she gives the masculine purpose. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening today. I wanted to jump in real quick and share something that I'm really excited about. Beginning on October 15th, I'm going to be leading a live 8-week version of the Inspired Love program. For the last couple years, the program has only been available to my lifetime coaching circle members, and I am thrilled to be able to offer it again in this format. You can learn more in the show notes below where you're listening to this podcast. Space is limited, so make sure to check out the details now and grab your spot if you want to join. This is going to be a profound 8 weeks together, and I do not want you to miss it. So thanks for listening today, and I'll see you there. Right. When there is a need to be met, the masculine now has purpose. The masculine is now guided, and he's oriented in a way that his life now has meaning and purpose. And one of the things that so many men struggle with in relationships, and I know I hear it from women all the time, I want my man to be more masculine. Well, part of the reason that men are not more masculine is because women are so self-sufficient. And I don't think women being self-sufficient is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. There are a lot of women in our world who are not safe for a myriad of reasons, and we may or may not touch on that today, right? But women being self-sufficient is a good thing because they need to be in today's world. A woman who is not self-sufficient in today's world is in trouble. But in partnership, if a woman wants her man to be more masculine, she needs to surrender some of her self-sufficiency to give him a space in her life. And if she doesn't surrender some of that self-sufficiency, he's going to feel irrelevant in her life. He's going to feel like he has no place. He might want to provide, he might want to give, he might want to take care of her, he might want to offer her something. But if she's so accustomed to meeting all of her needs that she doesn't need anything from him, he's going to feel like he has no place. And so this is how we need to create polarity in partnership. And again, if you're in a typical, I'm just talking about the culture of the US here, although I think this is the culture in other places too. But if you're in kind of a typical, United States household where maybe you have 2 incomes and you both work and you have kids and you've got to take the kids to soccer practice and you've got to, pay the bills and you've got a leaky pipe that needs to be fixed and you've got meals that need to be prepared. Like, just for pure means of survival, both partners need to be in their masculine a lot of the time. That's just a reality of the condition of our society. Now, if we lived in a more tribal society where, maybe the men or the masculine oriented people, and it's funny, even in tribal societies, if you look at some of these studies, there were women who would go hunting with the men. Right. So that it wasn't that only the men did it, but it was that there were women in the society that were more masculine oriented. And so they would go hunting with the men. And there were also men who would kind of stay back at the camp with the women, and they were the more feminine oriented women in certain societies. But I digress. That's not really relevant for what we're talking about. But my point is that if we lived in a different kind of society, there might be more space for people to spend more time in their feminine. In our society, there's not a lot of space for that because it's so production oriented. We're so busy, and we need to stay busy to survive in this society. And so we are habitually operating in our masculine, both men and women, to the point of exhaustion, to the point of like almost burnout. And then when we finally get a break at the end of all this doing and activity that we have to do just to survive in this world, we sit down on the couch at the end of the day, we turn on the TV, and we both sit in our feminine, and we go from completely active to completely inactive. but there's no polarity there, right? We go from being completely active to completely inactive, but there's not a time in our day when one person is in the masculine wanting to provide for the other, and the other is in the feminine wanting to receive from the other, and it creates this kind of magnetism. And that's really the challenge in so many of our modern relationships. This is why often our sex lives die like years into our marriage. It's because we're both operating in our masculine to the point of burnout, and then we both get into our feminine when it's time to go to bed, and we just want to sit in front of the TV for 15 minutes before we got to get up and do it all over again. And we lose this dynamic polarity in our partnerships. And so the feminine, as I was saying, the power of the feminine is that she directs the masculine. She gives the masculine purpose, right? A man never feels more manly than when his woman needs something and he can provide that for her. Whether that's taking her out and romancing her. You know, one of my mentors, she used to do, her name's Betty Sproul. She's a master. But she used to do these polarity teachings, right? And she would teach about the masculine and the feminine and these kind of things. And she used to say that men bring the romance and women bring the sex. And I thought that was hilarious when I first heard it, but it's true, right? Because if you look at what's being said there, men bring the romance, men are providing the romance. They're providing the container in which the feminine can feel safe to open up. And then when the feminine feels safe to open up, that's when sex happens, right? And so the masculine, by bringing the romance, provides the container, provides the safety, provides the structure. This is when a woman is being courted by a man. The whole purpose in courtship is to make her feel safe in the relationship. Right? When a man is courting a woman, that's really his role or his responsibility, is to make her feel safe in the relationship. And then when she feels safe in the relationship, that's when she opens up and sex happens. And I'm not just talking about sex, but that's when, in a healthy dynamic, and there are all kinds of bastardizations of this dynamic, but in a healthy dynamic, when he makes her feel safe, she kind of surrenders to the relationship with him. Now, what we have in our modern situation, and this is a bastardization of all these principles, is that we have women chasing men, right? And women are feeling unsafe chasing men, trying to get the men to offer them the safety and the security that they need, rather than expecting that as a kind of prerequisite to have a place in her life. And so now we're getting into the needs of the masculine and the feminine. And that's what I really wanted to talk about today, are the needs of the masculine and the needs of the feminine in partnership and how we meet these needs. And so I was just touching on it, so I'll just start with that. The core need of the feminine is safety and security. The feminine cannot be expressed. It cannot be embodied without safety and security. The moment that the feminine does not feel safe, she will immediately step into her masculine to make herself feel safe, right? Or maybe a better way to say that is the moment a woman does not feel safe, or a man, but for simplicity purposes, it's just easier to talk about women being feminine and men being masculine. But the moment a woman does not feel safe, she will immediately step into her masculine to make herself feel safe. Now, and I know a lot of you ladies, when you hear this, are going to relate to this. Men in our world have not been really trained or taught how to, or the importance of keeping women safe. If we grew up in a kind of tribal society, there would have been certain roles that the men or the masculine people had and certain roles that the women or the feminine people had. And there would have been certain rites of passage that were gone through that would have trained us in these social dynamics where men kind of knew their place in the society and women kind of knew their place in the society. And I don't mean this in a patriarchal kind of sense. That's more what we have now. But I mean in a sense where everybody kind of knew what their role was, what their place was in their society. And part of that would have been the men understanding that part of their role was to keep the women safe, was to provide a container of safety and security for the women, right? And this might look like fending off predators. This might look like going out and hunting the food. It might look like all these kinds of things, the providing and the protecting to make sure that the women or the feminine had a safe place to be in the society. We, in our, modernization and everything that we've adapted into as humans, and part of this is like our ultra independence, right? Where we don't really recognize ourselves as a part of a holistic system. We see ourselves as an individual, as an isolated entity in kind of lost in the world. And part of this like hyper individuality and this hyper independence is that we don't recognize our place in the whole. And there haven't been rites of passage that we've gone through that have helped us to understand our place in the whole. And one of the things that we've lost as a result of that, as I was just saying, is this awareness in men that, I say in men, but at least as masculine oriented people, this awareness that our role is to create a safe space for the feminine. And because, part of kind of the patriarchy that we live in and this overvalue of the masculine energy and this undervalue of the feminine energy has caused, as I was saying earlier, everybody to want to operate in their masculine, right? It's caused everybody to want to operate in their masculine, men and women alike. And so it's kind of rare in our world when there's a safe space for the feminine to be expressed. And so sometimes the feminine can only be expressed when you're alone, right? When you're sitting on your couch in your house at night and nobody's around you and there's nothing to kind of threaten your peace and you're not, alerted to any threats or any lack of safety. And that's when you can really just be. Or maybe sometimes, with a partner, there are certain times when you feel really safe with your partner, but other times when you don't. And so there's not a cultural awareness of the importance of the feminine and a prioritization of creating a safe space for the feminine to exist. And this is, again, why we lack this kind of polarity in our relationships. And so the core need of the feminine is safety, right? The feminine cannot be expressed without safety. Now, the core need of the masculine is to be needed and to be appreciated. So for a masculine person, or for the masculine energy, which exists in all people, right? But for the masculine energy to be expressed in a healthy way, there needs to be a need to be met, a need that wants to be met, a desire that wants to be fulfilled. So again, this could look like you preparing a meal for somebody who wants to eat it. There's a need that wants to be met, and the healthy masculine expression is to step in and meet a need that wants to be met. The toxic masculine expression is to meet needs that don't want to be met. Right? So an example of this is, some of you who have like traditional mothers, you might relate to this, where you go to their house and they're like, eat more food, eat more food, eat more food, right? And you're like, I'm full, I had enough. They're like, no, eat more, eat more, eat more, right? They're trying to provide a need that doesn't want to be met. That's a toxic masculine expression. Right now, I know some of you, especially if you're just joining me, you might think, well, wait, that's my mother, she's trying to feed me. Isn't that a feminine thing? No, that's a masculine thing. Because it's providing, right? Again, the feminine is the receiver, not the provider. So the toxic masculine has the same masculine need that it's whether it's toxic or whether it's healthy, the masculine need is to provide something. And when there's not a willing, desiring recipient of that thing, what the toxic masculine tries to do is it tries to force that need to be met. An extreme example of this might be triggering for some people. An extreme example of this would be rape. Right? Like that's an extreme example of the toxic masculine, where they are forcing a need that doesn't want to be met. The healthy opposite expression is when the feminine completely surrenders to her man in the bedroom and completely opens herself up to him, and she wants him to fulfill that need, and he feels totally fulfilled in rocking her world. Right? That's the healthy expression. And so the core masculine need is to be needed and to be appreciated for the thing that they're providing. The core feminine need is to have safety and security, to feel safe enough to let go of all the providing and protecting that I do for myself and let someone else provide it for me. If we just take an example of a meal, right? If somebody's going to provide me a meal, well, on a basic level, like I have to feel safe enough that they're not going to poison me when they feed me that meal. Right? Like I can't receive that meal that's being provided for me if I'm afraid they're going to poison it. So in order for me to receive anything from someone, in order for the feminine to receive anything from the masculine, they have to feel safe enough in what's being offered, in what's being provided. And so in relationships, in order to be fulfilled in our relationships, and most women say, I want my man to be more masculine. I want him to be a strong protector. I want him to be a strong provider. And most men say, I want my woman to be more feminine. I want her to be soft and warm and receptive, and I want her to be open to me and let me give her what I have to offer. In order for this to happen, and I want to say, like, I'm being very general with these examples, because a woman, and like this is my wife does all the cooking in this house, and she loves it when she prepares like an amazing meal for us. And I always say, like, man, who eats like this? If she's listening right now, she's laughing at this, right? I'm always like, who eats like this, man? Like, man, we eat so good in this house, right? So that's her providing, that's her being in her masculine, right? But a woman can get just as much joy out of providing as a man can, right? So this really, in a healthy relationship, goes both ways. It's not that one person is giving and giving and giving and the other person is taking and taking and taking, but there's actually a flow of giving and receiving. There's a one person providing something the other person needs, and then we switch and the other person provides something that this person needs. Maybe my wife might provide a meal. And so I might come up from a long day of work and sit down at the table, and I might shift into my feminine for a moment while she provides a meal. And then we might sit down and I might ask her how her day was, and she might unload everything that happened on her day. And I'll hold this space for her while she shares, what happened in her day and the conversation she had with her family or whatever. And then I'm meeting a need that she has. And I'm holding that safe space for her to kind of release her day. And so there's this flow of giving and receiving. There's this flow of there's a giving in the relationship, and then there's a receiving, and then there's another person giving in the relationship, and there's another person receiving. And it's not about one person being in the masculine all the time and one person being in the feminine all the time. Although, granted, we do want I would say most women want to experience their partner in the strength of their masculine. And most men want to experience their partner or their feminine partner in the softness of her feminine. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you enjoy the Conscious Love Show, there are a few things you can do with just a few seconds of your time that will really support us in being able to continue bringing these messages to you every single week, completely free of charge. The first thing you can do is give us a 5-star rating on one of the major podcast platforms. The two most popular for this show are Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but you can leave a rating on any platform where you listen to this podcast. And if you'd be willing to take just an extra moment, you can write a few words about the show and share with people how it's touched you and the difference it's made in your life. That will go a very long way in supporting our show. Possibly the biggest thing you can do to support the show is share it with someone that you know can benefit from it. If you get a lot out of it, it's very likely that a friend or loved one of yours will too. And I appreciate it so much when people share the show. If you wanted to take the extra step, you could post a link to today's show on your stories or socials and help get the word out in that way. If you'd be willing to take just one of these steps today, I would appreciate that so much. And I want to say thank you in advance for caring about the show and being willing to support it. Thanks again for listening today. Your presence here means everything to me, and I hope you continue joining me each week for many years to come. Lots of love, and let's get back to the show. Largely, we would say for a man to feel in his masculine, he needs to be needed, and he needs to be appreciated for what he's providing. And for the woman to be in a receptive state, for the woman to be able to feel safe receiving what is being offered, he needs to create a space in which she feels safe. And so this is the dynamic of healthy, polarized partnership. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how this works in the early stages of a relationship, when you're just dating someone or when you're just getting to know them, and then how it evolves over time in partnership. Because in the beginning, and I said this earlier, but I want to come back to this, it is just not safe for women in our world to be feminine all the time, especially as a single woman. But even if you're married, even if you're in a partnership, I mean, you go to the grocery store, you go out, you're doing your thing. Like you've got to take care of yourself sometimes in this world. It's just the reality. It's just the way it is. So when a woman is meeting a man, it's going to begin often as both people being in their masculine to a degree. See, that polarity is something that is earned. It's not something that's just given. And I'm gonna clarify what I mean about this because I know this can be confusing. But one thing I want to say first is that something else that happens in our kind of modern world, where again, as I was saying earlier, we're kind of disconnected from these rites of passage, right? Where in a more tribal like society, men would have been taught about their place of keeping and protecting the feminine and keeping her safe, right? And so because we've been kind of disconnected from these rites of passage, and we've been disconnected from really understanding our role as a part of a larger ecosystem, and we have this hyper individuality, and we all feel like, we're our own person, one in a million kind of thing, because that's how our society is operating. And women, because they are physically vulnerable and they just don't feel safe in our world, and men, because they are not physically vulnerable and they do feel safe in our world, men often operate in more of a feminine role. And so the way this looks I've talked about this before, how there ends up being like a reversal of the sexual energy because the men in our world are not taking responsibility for keeping the women safe. What's happening is the women have gotten so used to providing for themselves and keeping themselves safe, and men have gotten so comfortable in feeling safe that men tend to relax more into the feminine sometimes, and women tend to jump right into that masculine role sometimes. And then you have women chasing men and trying to prove themselves to men and trying to provide, look how great I am, look how wonderful I am, look how lovable I am, look how much you should want to be with me. And it's actually a reversal of the natural order of things. There was a time in like a Victorian era, and there was a lot about this that was toxic and dysfunctional. I'm not saying like these were the good old days, but there was a certain dynamic that I think was really kind of how it should be. There was a certain dynamic where if a man wanted to court a woman, he would go to her family and he would ask permission to court her. And they would like sit on the front porch of her house, and he'd be like, I want to call on you. Right. And then he would go and he would like sit on the front porch with her where her family could keep an eye on her. And he would like earn the right to take her out. Right. He would have to like prove himself first, and he would have to show that like he was safe. He would have to show that he was like going to protect her and he was going to honor her. And then once he kind of proved that, he would be allowed to take her out of the house. Now, I know a lot of women are like, what? My family's going to tell me what I could take. I understand that would never work in today's society. And I'm not even saying that's how it should be. But I'm saying there's a dynamic there that was very much in alignment with the proper masculine and feminine energy, where there was an awareness that the woman was to be kept safe, and an awareness that the woman was to be protected. And there was an awareness in the man where he recognized that if he wanted a place in this woman's life, that he needed to earn that place. He needed to earn the approval of her family. He needed to earn the approval of her. And he wasn't just like taking her out and sleeping with her and never calling her again. Like he would show up and sit on her front porch and talk to her, and he would earn the right to be able to take her out of her house. Right? There was a cultural awareness about that we don't have anymore. Now, again, that society had a lot of other toxic stuff going on. I'm not saying those were the good old days, but I'm saying there was a certain awareness about how these energies properly work. We don't have that now. And so what happens a lot of times in the dating world is that men are not in this awareness of like, I need to earn my right in this woman's life. I need to show up for her as a protector and a provider. I need to make her feel safe. Right? men are not operating from this consciousness and from this awareness. Men are allowing women to chase them all over the place. And women, because they've become so accustomed to providing for themselves, they're letting this happen. And so there's a reversal of the sexual energy where the women are going like, let me prove myself to you. Let me show you how great I am. Let me show you how lovable I am. Let me cook for you. Let me clean for you. Let me pay all your bills. Let me show you how wonderful a life with me could be. And men are allowing this to happen. Now, I don't want to say this is how it always is. There are a lot of men in the world who are proud to be a protector and a provider. There are a lot of men in the world that want to offer that to their women. But there is a certain culture of men who have not been taught this, who do not understand this. And so, as a woman, it's very important for you to understand this. It's very important for you to understand what a healthy masculine partner looks like. And when I say providing, like I'm not necessarily saying that a man needs to pay all your bills or anything like that. Because I mean, look, if you're in a typical US household, it often takes two incomes to pay the bills. That's just the way it is today. So I'm not saying that you need someone who's going to pay all your bills and do everything. But what I'm saying is you need someone who is going to recognize that it is their role. And I'm speaking to the women right now. You need someone who is going to recognize that it is their role to make you feel safe. Their job is to provide a sense of safety and security for you. And if somebody doesn't provide that for you as a woman, he has nothing to offer you. And so how does a man provide safety and security? In the early stages, and again, this can change throughout your relationship, but in the early stages, he shows it by being consistent. He shows it by initiating. He shows it by calling and texting and reaching out. He shows it by making his interest in you clear. Right? Like it's not like this hot and cold thing where, oh, I'm all into you one day and the next day I disappear. That's actually more of a feminine thing to do. And I'm not saying that women should play games and be hot and cold. I think honestly, both partners should be emotionally available and honest about their intentions. But like I look at when I was dating my wife and, her being a woman in the world who had had a lot of, traumatic experiences with men, her growing up in a certain culture that was, hard for women, her having a lot of men who, did different things that were dishonoring and things like that to her. She was naturally a little uncertain about our relationship. She was naturally a little like, I don't know if I can trust this. Now, she wasn't manipulative. She didn't play games. She wasn't dishonest. She was authentic. She was vulnerable. She told me how she felt, right? So she was very upfront and honest and clear. She wasn't any kind of manipulative or playing games or anything like that. But she was understandably not 100% sure about it. And so it was normal for her in the feminine role to kind of feel this out and be like, is this safe? Can I trust this? It was normal for her in the feminine role to test the relationship a little bit, right? To withdraw a little bit and say, how does he respond when I withdraw? right? Not for her to just pour herself more and more and more and more and more into the relationship. No, it was normal for her to want to be pursued a little bit. And this was actually a deep feminine wisdom that she was operating from. Again, I want to be clear, this is not game playing. Game playing is like, oh, I'm not going to text him all day and I'm going to make him sweat. Like that's not what my wife did. But what she did do was she would communicate to me, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if this is the partnership that's right for me. And her communicating that gave her the opportunity to see how I responded to that. Did I respond in a way that made her feel safe enough to continue exploring it? Or did I respond in a way that made her feel unsafe? You see, a lot of men, if a woman were to say something like that, they were to say, like, oh, well, I don't really know how I feel about this, or I'm not too sure, or I'm figuring things out, or I'm confused, or I'm conflicted. A lot of men would be like, well, if you don't know what you want, then why am I wasting my time with you? Like that kind of thing. And you see, the feminine is not, it's not her role to be 100% certain, because the feminine is deeply intuitive. The feminine is dynamic. The feminine is always feeling into deep, different aspects of her experience. She's tuning into different aspects of herself. She's receiving information from higher dimensions, right? She's connected in a way that the masculine is not. And so it's normal for the feminine to feel her way in and out of certain things. It's the masculine role to be certain. And so when my wife would be going through her process of feeling this out and discovering herself in the context of this relationship and kind of testing and seeing, how is he going to show up for me in these different situations? The way I responded to that was by saying, I totally get that. I remember several instances where I said to my wife, if this isn't right for you and you want to go, then you can go. But I want you to know that I want this, that I'm committed to this. And so I'm going to be here. Now, if she had been manipulative and game playing and dishonest and, if she had been doing all that kind of stuff, I would not have been that way. And so something that she did was she honored my commitment. She made me feel needed. She made me feel appreciated, which is the masculine need. Right? She gave me that validation every time that she was going through some kind of confusing thing that she was working out and trying to figure out herself in the context of the relationship. And I would hold that safe space for her. She thanked me for it. She appreciated me for it. She rewarded that. And so again, there's this synergy, right? There's this synergy where I was creating a safe space for her, and she was appreciating and rewarding that and honoring and acknowledging that. And so both of these needs are being met. It is not the feminine's job. It is not the role of the feminine to decide a man she wants and pursue him. That is a masculine activity. That's what I did when I met my wife. I met a woman. I said, wow, this woman is amazing. This is the kind of woman I want to spend my life with. I'm going to do everything I can to be with her. The feminine's role is to receive what the masculine is offering. The feminine role is to sit back and see, even, like if I go back to that example in the kind of Victorian thing where the guy would go to the house and sit on the front porch, it often wasn't just one man coming to the house and sitting on the front porch. It was different men coming to the house and sitting on the front porch. And she would sit with these different men and she would talk to them and they would drink tea and coffee and whatever. And of these different men who were coming to court her, she would decide, this is the man that I feel safest with. Right? She wasn't going out around town knocking on all these doors asking, these men's families if she could court them. That wasn't the way it was working. Someone says, sounds like dating in the Middle East in 2024. Well, I guess not everybody has advanced beyond that. And again, I don't necessarily think that culture is completely healthy. There's a lot of repression of women that happens in that culture, and that's not healthy at all. But I think that particular dynamic about keeping the woman safe, about the men having a certain consciousness where they need to show up and provide a safe space and earn that place in her life, that's very much in alignment. And so in our modern world, maybe it's on dating apps, right? Maybe it's not, they're not coming to sit on your front porch. Maybe the dating app is the modern front porch, right? Or maybe the coffee shop or the yoga class or whatever, maybe that's the modern front porch, right? But, I often say for a woman, like, if you meet a man and you talk to him and there's a connection and you feel like you resonate with him, give him your phone number, right? Invite him to call on you. But you don't ask for his number. You don't start blowing him up. Right? I actually think for women to get comfortable connecting with men and giving out their phone numbers, for single women who are looking for a partnership, that is one of the most powerful practices, is to get comfortable connecting with men and giving out your phone number. But you're not sitting around going like, when's he going to call? Why didn't he call? Now you're getting into the role of pursuing. No, if he calls, he calls. If he doesn't call, he doesn't call. You are in the receptive mode. You are in the role of receiving what the masculine wants to bring to you. You are in the role of looking at the different men who are coming to court you and seeing, what are they offering? What degree of safety are they providing? And again, when I talk about safety, I'm talking about consistency. I'm talking about clarity of intention. I'm talking about like asking you out, taking you out, asking you for a second date. Now, there's nothing wrong if you go out with a man and you have a great date with him. There's nothing wrong with texting him at the end of the date and saying, hey, this was a wonderful date. I had a great time. I would love to see you again. Because what are you doing? You are showing him that there's a need there and you are appreciating his effort. That is the feminine role. Right? To expect a man to endlessly call on you and to endlessly pursue you without acknowledging that you need and want his presence and without appreciating the effort he makes, that's unreasonable. No man is going to do that. They're going to think you're not interested. Right? Yes, there's a difference between creating an opening and pursuing. Right? The feminine invites because she receives. She lets them know, hey, the door is open, but I'm not going to drag you through it. And so what I really want to get into here, and I only have another couple of minutes to speak on this, but I want to say that I've talked a lot about how it is in the beginning, right? I've talked a lot about how it is in the early stages. And when in the early stages, and I would say maybe like there's like a period of maybe 3 months where you really see if that man, I'm speaking to the women again, where you really see if that man is going to show up and give you that safety and give you that security. And by the way, this is a whole other tangent, but there's a certain amount of healing that a lot of women need to do, because a lot of women feel that if they're not pursuing someone, they're not attracted to someone, right? If someone's not making me chase them, if a man is pursuing me, if he's showing his interest, if he's available, he's not that attractive. So there's a lot of healing that a lot of women need to do because they've been trained in this way of operating. But for a woman who is ready to receive a healthy masculine partner and ready for someone to create safety for her, after about 3 months of someone authentically kind of pursuing you, that's I would say the initial phase. And that's maybe where we become exclusive, right? Maybe that's where we become like boyfriend, girlfriend, or where we start to take the relationship somewhat seriously. And then after that, there's about a year-long phase of really seeing how this person shows up in the more intricate dynamics of a relationship. And I would say it evolves, and this might be a topic for a whole other podcast because I don't have much more time to talk about it today. But this is where, what do I want to say here? This is where it becomes less about the polarity being all on one side or the other, right? One person is all feminine and one person is all masculine. And this is where you start to give and receive with each other. You both start to bring what you have to give to the relationship. And you start to see what is this person's capacity for appreciation. What is this person's ability to receive? What is this person's ability to give? And that opens up to a whole other realm of dynamics that define long-term intimacy. And I think that might just be a topic for a future episode because, like I said, I've about talked all I can about this today. But so I want to really just come back to the simple point, and I'm going to end with this, and then I'll open up for some questions if there are any questions. But what I want to say is that the core masculine need, as I've mentioned, is to be needed and to be appreciated. And so as a feminine partner in a relationship, to create polarity, to create attraction, your role is to surrender into that receiving mode and let your partner know that they are needed. Let your partner have a space to give what they have to give and appreciate them for doing so. The core feminine need is safety. And so as a masculine partner, your role is to make sure your partner feels safe, to feel safe within the context of the relationship, to feel safe in their life, to feel safe to express their emotions, to feel safe to be themselves. And for a feminine partner to never give their man a space to be needed and to appreciate the things that he has to offer, he's not going to show up as the masculine partner you want him to be. A lot of women, this is a common dynamic. A lot of women become highly critical. Right? That is the most emasculating thing you can do to a man, is to criticize him, to point out the ways he's not doing or being enough. No self-respecting man will tolerate that. And if you find a man who will tolerate that, you will completely emasculate him. And no woman is going to be receptive and allow a man to be that provider, to give what he has to offer. No woman is going to be able to receive that if she doesn't feel safe. So this is a dynamic interaction between the partners where one person is giving, the other is receiving. The recipient is appreciating. The appreciation encourages him to give more. The more he gives and the more she receives, the more she appreciates. The more she appreciates, the more he wants to give. And again, this can flow the other way too. There are lots of ways that feminine partners give to their man. And it's not about one person giving all the time and one person receiving all the time. It's about having this flow of giving and receiving that is a constant energetic dynamic in the relationship. Appreciation is a form of giving, right? So when someone gives, we appreciate what's being given, and it creates this flow. All right, so that's man, I really feel like I have so much more to say about this, but that's as far as I can go with it today. I've seen a few questions come in. I want to go through and answer some questions today. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm just going to take a moment and answer as many questions as I can here. First question is, so how does a woman who has been with a man for years, not in his masculine, get out of that cycle because she has now been critical? So to break the cycle, I mean, it would be to stop being critical and to start being appreciative. It would be to start recognizing what your needs are, and maybe there are unmet needs because he hasn't been in his masculine. Right? So you would start recognizing, what do you need from him? You would start asking him to meet those needs, and you would start appreciating his efforts. Now, this could create magic, right? This could be like all of a sudden he feels needed. All of a sudden he feels like he has a purpose that he feels like he's been deprived of for a long time. And so now, like when you're like, honey, could you do this for me? Or it would make me really happy. Or, like there are different ways to express it. And I can't go into all of that right now, but it could create magic because all of a sudden, he's going from feeling criticized and feeling like his inadequacies are constantly being pointed out and feeling like, he's never enough. And no matter what he doesn't make you happy. Right. So he's going from feeling like that to now feeling needed and purposeful and appreciated. This could create magic. It like literally could. Now, the other alternative that could happen is there could be so much resentment in the relationship that he has no interest in meeting your needs. If there's been this kind of critical dynamic, and I'm not saying that you're completely at fault. He's probably much at fault for it too. But if there's been kind of this critical, resentful dynamic between you, he may have no interest in meeting your needs. And so this is where a really call it like a come to Jesus conversation is necessary, right? Okay, like let's sit down and talk about our relationship. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? Do we want to resent each other for the rest of our lives? Do we want to let this relationship go and find something else that could make us happy? Do we want to really lean in and work on this? Right? So if this dynamic has been going on for years, that's where it's time to really sit down and say, like, what are we doing? Is this how we want the rest of our lives to be? Like, do we want our relationship to be different? And if so, what are we going to do about that? And honestly, if you've been doing this for years, the patterns are probably so ingrained that you would need help. You're probably not just going to turn it around on your own. So this is where you would work with a therapist or a counselor or a coach of some kind. This is where you would take your relationship to have it mediated by someone who is skilled in doing this kind of mediation and start reestablishing the foundation that you operate with each other on. Usually when these patterns have been ingrained for years, you cannot fix it on your own. But what you can do is you can again say, look, are we just done? Do we just not want to be together? Do we just want to call it quits and go pursue our happiness somewhere else? And it's okay if you choose that. Or you can say, do we really want to do something about this? Do we really want to work on this? And maybe you sit down together and you review different therapists or different counselors or coaches. And maybe you interview a few of them and you like decide together on who you want to work with, who you feel comfortable with, and you start to build your relationship on a new foundation. So I hope that helps. You could start by just asking for what you need and being appreciative and stop being critical. You could see how far that gets you. If that doesn't elicit a different kind of relating from him, the next step is to really have a real conversation about your relationship and where it's going. So sending love. I know it's really tough when you get caught in these dynamics. It's really tough. So Ibn Sul, does the appreciation from the feminine need to be verbal or just being together and seemingly happy? I think it's both. So does it need to be verbal? Not all the time. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, everybody wants to be acknowledged, right? And if you get into like the love languages conversation, right? Like different people have different love languages, and some are acts of service and some are words of affirmation and things like that. So if someone had a love language that was like words of affirmation, verbal acknowledgement might go a lot further than if their love language was quality time or physical touch. I think actually the love languages conversation can be very powerful in terms of recognizing how to show appreciation to your partner. Right? So if you know that your partner's love language is physical touch, maybe you go up and you put your arms around them and you give them a big hug and a kiss, and maybe you whisper in their ear, which I know this is words of affirmation, but it can work too. Is like, you put your arms around them and give them a big hug and a kiss and whisper in their ear, I really appreciate you. You're amazing. Right? So something like that. But I think, all forms of appreciation are valid. Just showing that you are happy, right? Being your warm, available, loving self is a form of appreciation, right? Being joyful, being warm, being receptive. So all of these can work. But I do think it never hurts to express clear and direct appreciation. That never hurts. And if someone is meeting a need that you have, why not appreciate them for it? Why not express that clear and verbal communication? Like, what would you hold that back for? So yes, it doesn't always have to be that, but I think it's important. I think if there's an absence of that, your relationship is going to suffer? So great question. And thank you for asking. So Casey has this awesome question. Do you think a woman should be as gracious with a man who says he's not sure what he wants? Now, this is what I was saying earlier, right? That's where you step up and it's the conversation is like, listen, this is what I need. If you can't offer what I need, I'm going to go find it somewhere else. Now, there might be a more gentle way to say that, right? And it might depend on the nuance or the context of the situation. But let's just say, for example, that you've been, maybe there's someone that you're attracted to and you like them and you've been kind of seeing each other off and on, but they're inconsistent, right? They're like, hey, I want to see you and I'll call you next week. And then they don't, something like that, right? So they're not creating safety. Well, if they're not creating safety, the conversation you would have with them, and I do think because, as I was saying earlier, men are not taught this, right? Actually, if anybody's going to teach men this, it's going to be women. It really is. And I know that's a lot for women, and I'm sorry, but this is just where we are in our world. A lot of men, it's not like their fathers are teaching them this. It's not like their society is teaching them this. So where are they going to learn this? They're going to learn this in the way that women interact with them. And so if a man is not being clear about what he wants, the conversation might look something like this. Hey, the time that we've spent together has been wonderful. I really like you. I've really enjoyed spending time with you. It's been great. But the fact that you're inconsistent is a big problem for me. And, I wanted to let you know before I just disappeared, but I just want to be clear about this. Like, if you're not consistent with me, I'm not going to hang around. Like, if you can't be more consistent, the next time you call me, I'm not going to be available. And I just wanted to be honest with you and let you know that I really like you. I would really enjoy getting to know you more, but this is kind of a deal breaker for me. Like, I need a man in my life who wants to be consistent, who wants to show up for me. And if you're not available for that right now, or you're not able to do that right now, I get it. No hard feelings, but you're just not the man for me. So it might look something like that. It's a little strong. It's a little powerful, but what you're doing is you're calling him to the plate. And again, like, he might be a man who is totally willing to do that. He might be a man who on some level wants to do that. But he's never been taught that that's what he needs to do. A lot of men are taught to be inconsistent, right? There's this whole thing we've seen it on, I think I was watching Friends the other night. They were talking about it, right? Where it's like this whole thing of like, you don't call for 3 days after a date. Well, that's not consistent. That doesn't create safety. Right? That whole like, don't call for 3 days, that doesn't create safety. That creates insecurity. You go out with someone, you have a great date, and then you don't hear from them afterwards. And that person's going like, what? Did they not like me? Right? That doesn't create safety. That doesn't create security. So the thing to do as a man, if you're genuinely interested in a woman, if you had a great date with them and you want to see them again, is to call them the next day. Or to text them the next day. Like, that's what I did. When I met my wife, we ended up spending like a weekend together. I called her the very next day. That creates safety. That made her feel safe in this relationship. But again, men haven't been taught to do that, right? Again, I was just watching it on Friends. We see it on TV. We hear it from our friends. We see it everywhere. It's like, oh, don't call for 3 days. You'll look desperate, which is just a stupid rule. But it's something we buy into and it's something we believe. And we start getting trained into this at a very young age when we're like adolescent. And so sometimes a man needs a woman to let him know what she wants from him. Sometimes a man needs a woman to express the need that he can provide. And when she clearly says, listen, I want to hear from you every day. I don't want to go days without talking to you. That gives him clarity. And the masculine in him is like, okay, now I know what the need is. Now I can meet it. So it's totally okay to create that boundary. It's totally okay to draw that line. I truly think a lot more men would step up to the plate if women got comfortable saying what they need from them. And here's the wonderful thing about saying what you need is that if he doesn't step up to the plate after that, well, now you have absolute clarity that he's not the kind of man you can trust. So, yeah, I don't think you should be super gracious with a man who's not creating safety for you. I think you should be a little strong with him. I think you should let him know what you need and find out if he's the kind of man who is willing to provide what you need. And maybe he just doesn't exactly know what that is because nobody's ever told him. So that's a great question, Casey. I appreciate you bringing that up. Sending so much love to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today. This has been a great conversation. I've loved the questions that have come in, and thank you so much for everything all of you have shared today. It's always wonderful to be on here and connect with you. This is the Conscious Love Show podcast. If you haven't caught the whole episode today, make sure to subscribe to my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It's called the Conscious Love Show. You can tune in there and you can catch the full episode. We're talking today about how to meet the needs of the masculine and feminine. So sending so much love to all of you. Pleasure as always to be on. I'll see you back here next week. And take care. Lots of love. Many blessings. Take care, everybody. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.